You unlock this benefit with the key of Patreon. Beyond is another dimension. A dimension of thought. A dimension of speculation. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both waffle and substance. Of things and ideas. You've just crossed into the podcast zone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to us trekking through the Twilight Zone. We have been going on for many little adventures all over the place, but today we're going to be talking about someone's execution. And as always, I am joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing okay. I don't have any rope burns on my neck, do I?
No, you're not a criminal out of time. Yes, we were talking about the episode Execution, in which a murderer, a known felon, when being hung in 1880 something, is pulled through time to the modern world, and upon seeing that modern world is shocked and sort of troubled by it, but then kills the professor, scientist, and then is let loose on the world eventually until an ironic twist, as usual, these Twilight Zones, and he is hung with a blind cord by a criminal. So, Julian, what do you think about this episode?
It's not a very impressive episode to me. I am fascinated by the Twilight Zone's depiction of criminals sometimes as just, occasionally Serling is very sympathetic and he is rooted in a kind of humanitarian understanding, but there is this kind of like, criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot. They're just kill crazy, they're going around on killing sprees, sort of thing that's going on. What did you think?
It's all right, but this is one of the first ones. Well, we've said it before, I think. We often say about the time, they get like 22 minutes or 24 minutes or whatever. This one feels like not a great deal happens, but also that it needed more time. It feels very compressed, this whole thing. And so it rushes through it. And so it never really feels like it says very much, which is a shame, because I think there is something quite cool to say about this, especially about this idea of morality from Old West versus modern day.
Yeah, does it really get into that at all? I mean, there's a criminal in the modern day who winds up robbing, coincidentally, the same place with a time machine. It's sort of like, yeah, there were Wild West gunmen who are out, like he says, I lost count after 20 men I killed, I don't even think most of the famous outlaws killed 20 men.
No, but like Billy the Kid was sort of thing. Allegedly credited with 21 for every year he was alive. But even that's a myth. Mm-hmm. So it's one of these sort of Old West sort of stories, isn't it? But I thought it was going to go somewhere and have some sort of like morality tale if he was going to face up to, the consequences of his crimes or something. But yeah, it never really comes to pass. Like, and that's the thing. Like, it doesn't seem to. This episode struggles to say sort of anything, other than sort of. I think more precautions need to be put in place around time travel experimentation.
we need one of those sort of cliche like time guilds that guard the time stream or something.
More a case of like this scientist is almost like he's not entirely sure what's going to happen, who he's pulling through from time, where from, or anything, and then he's just stood there alone. Like he doesn't have anybody else. Like, granted, it's this sign. It's pulled through a cowboy, but it could have been anyone. It's very loosey goosey on this whole idea of science.
Yeah, how does that work? I mean, it's not really clear. It's like he's got a time machine, but does it just pull a random person from 1880? I mean,
well, the thing is, it sends the criminal at the end of the episode back to exactly the same place, and he ends up in the noose. So, but the thing is, and we often have this conversation when we have watched time travel movies, is this idea of you need to have rules. Like, I don't mind if it varies or how you want to set it up, but you need to have rules as to how your time travel works. And previous episodes sort of got round that a little bit. The one with the biplane pilot turning up in, like, that was good because it was a closed loop. Like, he had to go back to complete his loop and all this other stuff. So that was fine. But yeah, this one's so loosey goosey with its sort of rules around time travel that it all becomes a bit. It's like if you're going to be loose on that, then you need to be strong and make your moral point or have a point to it. But it doesn't seem to do that either.
No, it doesn't. And I think the closest thing that it gets is in the closing narration where he says, like, he got retribution. Let me see. It says retribution is not subject to a calendar. Tonight's case in point in the Twilight Zone. And it's this sort of idea that we keep seeing of the Twilight Zone sort of occurs in a moral universe in which, evil will out, right? And except we've seen that before and done much better. And I'm not sure what it's really saying there, except like, well, this bad guy got catapulted forward in time where he was killed. I mean, it is kind of a surprise to me when he's killed off, and I didn't see that coming. And he's sort of killed off with curtain cord, sort of strangled with it, sort of echoing the news. But it doesn't really make a point of that. And then the criminal who's killed him goes back in time and dies in that news, which I'm not bothered by the fact that the time machine is still set to the same coordinates or something. That makes sense to me. I'm willing to go with it. But I don't understand how it plucks Caswell, this criminal from the past, and I don't really buy that this is a just universe in which bad guys get what's coming to them.
No, well, this is the thing as well, because it's sort of, again, I am a bit of a sucker for fish out of water as well. So I like these ideas of someone going through time and being the fish out of water and having to sort of, there's moments of seeing when the scientist does sort of pull back the curtains and shows him this modern world, these tall buildings and the cars, all that stuff. I kind of love in these sort of things if it has an impact. But then when he kills a scientist and goes off into the street, like there's the bit where he's sort of on the phone and he's panicking in the phone booth, and he goes through the glass. I was like, that's quite cool because that's cliched of every Western, and so that sort of was interesting. But then when he goes into that sort of bar or whatever, and he's confronted with the barman, that is the most tolerant barman,
yes,
ever. Like, he keeps putting up with this guy's stuff for ages. Eventually, he's like, right, I'm going to have to call the police. And I'm like, he's trashed your place. He shot out your TV and all this other stuff. Like, you must have a really dodgy clientele if this is what you're willing to tolerate.
Yeah, I thought that too. Although it's really like a minute as Caswell trashes the jukebox. And then the barman just sort of casually says, like, you're going to pay for that. And then Caswell produces a gun, and then that changes the dynamic. And then at the end, of course, the barman, returns to sort of, I'm going to call the police. I do think that whole sort of fish out of water thing is sort of charming. I mean, if there's one part that sticks with me that I like best about the episode, it's just this wild, uncontrolled cowboy outlaw who is just like, he clearly doesn't understand, like, this city is filled with police officers and you're not going to go around murdering people left and right without being caught.
Well, that I think would have been a more interesting ending, because if he got caught up by the modern policing, like, he's not going to be hung or he's actually going to serve time, or he's been caught by modern police, would be more interesting, because it'd be then his commentary on, actually, we've advanced beyond the lynching mob to becoming somewhere actually where justice is about serving a penance rather than execution. But it doesn't even do that. And what I find was interesting as well is when the barman does say you're going to call the police, you hear the alarm, the sirens, and Caswell reacts to that. He runs off, and it stopped me in my tracks at that point. So I was like, well, firstly, police didn't exist in 1880 in the Old West, so he wouldn't know what the word police means. And then to hear sirens again wouldn't mean anything to him. I don't think the
Right.
sheriff didn't turn up with a with a light on the back of his horse. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they used a little miniature lighthouse of Alexandria on the back of horses. No, that's a very good point. And you often make these points about, especially the English language. And yeah, I mean, you made a similar point about the Immortal episode of sort of like, yeah, you're not going to speak the same way. And that's a very good point. And it's not something that a lot of shows, a lot of movies pay attention to, but you're quite right, of course.
yeah, but it's it's is it a really weak episode? It made me think about the episodes we've gone. Oh, that's a really weak one. And I was like, well, you know what? It's not a bad concept. It's just badly executed and doesn't really get to its point. But I like this idea of someone being pulled through time and then having to, especially if it's a criminal or a bad un, as it were, seeing being pulled through time. Like, how does that affect them? And they would then have to navigate the modern world. Like that, there's something that interesting something could be done there. Something interesting could be done. Like, could they fall in with a modern gang? Like, how would they then?
Yeah.
How would they then deal with a modern gang? Like, not just a one-off criminal, but and I love the idea as well. Sorry, of this criminal that does come in, like as if a scientist has got a wall safe.
Yeah. That is very. That has to be the strangest, most sort of annoying part of the episode. But, I mean, I like your idea of the fish out of water. I like that stuff too. I think that there's a version of this that is just of this episode that is just more focused on Caswell as an old-timey Western outlaw with no respect for the law, a sort of stereotype that really has more to do with Western movies than it does reality, who is like thrown into present day New York and goes on a wild killing spree. And it's just kind of a more comedic, lighthearted episode that just you get to watch his rampage, and eventually he gets gunned down by it's Elliot Ness or something. And they don't even know who he is. I mean, and it's a fun, lighthearted episode. That would have been more fun than this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a better version of this. I mean, to be fair, it does have a couple of jokes. That, like, say, the fish out of water stuff. I kind of think it's, like, say, funny when he pushes himself through the phone booth. But the other thing is when he's in the bar and he points at the television. And he's like, it's a window, and then the guy turns it on, and it just so happens to go onto a western in the middle of a duel or a shootout. And you get this. This film this episode both lives in and calls out the tropes of Western television in the 50s. Like you say, Caswell is an invention of Western movies, not the real Wild West. Yet when the thing that they show on the television with the tassels and the big leather chaps, again, is a product of Hollywood, not of the real Wild West. And it's calling that out, because he then shoots it down. But then, like I say, it's almost like it wants its cake and it wants to have its cake and eat it, and it doesn't quite work. It's not clever enough to do that in this case.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the sort of rampage and fish out of water stuff that is at least entertaining. I mean, it's fun watching him react to the television. Although I notice he shoots second, so he's not a very good gunman. I don't know how he killed 20 men when he can't defeat a television.
That's a very good point. Yeah, outgunned by a Saturday morning Western TV show. Yeah, but I'm sort of struggling to sort of get to a point with this episode because again we often sort of center in on a point about what it's trying to say or the theme or something that we want to. But there's just so little to this episode, in all honesty, that I'm a bit like, yeah, it's fine.
I mean, I think it's that final narration of no comment on his death save this. Justice can span years. This sort of like evil will out message that we see a lot. I mean, there's the O. Henry 2000 AD twist ending at the end, except am I the only one who is troubled by like this is supposed to occur in a mortal universe in which yes, there's time travel and Caswell's pulled to the present. And, of course, it's sad for the scientist who's killed, who's invented time travel, for God's sake.
Yeah.
But, humanity suffered on that one. But he's just a casualty of war for the sake of the moral plot of this episode, if you can call it that. But then at the end, when they realize that they've hung somebody else and they take him down and he's dead. And, the minister, the priest says, like, I hope he wasn't innocent. I pray to God he wasn't innocent. I thought, well, I mean, first of all, that's a really blithe statement. It's like I remember the last time I ran somebody down with my car and I just stood over the body and said, yeah, I hope they've done some terrible thing in life to deserve this. Oh, well. But then I also was disturbed by he gives just enough to that performance, like he does really care, that I thought, oh, this is going to haunt everybody present. Like, they're going to go through their life and be like, I don't know what happened, but I hung an innocent man. This is not happening.
That final moment, well, it's more the fact they agree to cover it up, because they're always like, yeah, we'll bury him. It's almost like we'll bury him and we don't tell anybody. Nobody has to know about this. Move on. Yeah, you say about this morality, but like it's inconsistent across this whole thing, which is why I think he should have been brought to justice. In the whole traveling back is ridiculous, but I think he should have been brought to justice by the police and had to face, modern justice, to say that, like, that's what you want to do. Like, we're beyond the lynching mob now. We face moral justice or something. But anyway, any final thoughts then on Execution?
No, I'm just haunted by what I did to that poor person.
Yeah, we'll let's say we'll keep that covered up. We'll leave that buried.
Yeah, just bury the body. It's all good. Shit happens in the Wild West.
Yeah, that's I think that's basically sort of what they have over some of those towns, isn't it? Sort of like, welcome to El Dorado. Shit happens in the Wild West. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. That was Execution. I hope you enjoyed it, and you'll join us on the next episode.